welcome everybody. It's a little context for where we're at and what we're doing. Like Theo said, this is the summer state of mind. And in light of, some recent changes in our community and some transition, let's say, we thought as an elders team and as a leadership team here at Reunion Oakville that it might be good for us to just kind of have like a chill kind of vibe as we approach Sundays, our Sunday gatherings over the summer, that we could get together, and the elders, of which I'm a member of the elders team, that we would each kind of take a Sunday, except for the Sundays where we're resting as Reunion, where we're Sabbathing, to kind of just share some thoughts, share some leading in word and in just for our community, to gather together and have these touch points. So it's like Theo said, it's kind of, I think we came up with, it's like church light. It's not like, it's church because two or more are gathered, right? but like we're just kind of vibing here. We're having some conversations together, and it's a very easy, chill kind of atmosphere. So I'm glad you're here. Welcome. And I get the awesome pleasure of going first. And there's like a recurring theme. I'm going to give full disclosure in my life right now. So I get to kind of do the first one after the sort of initial shock of finding out that our pastor has resigned, and we sort of went through that transition. I'm also doing something this week at work where I'm leading devotions this Tuesday, and the denomination that I work with has also gone through some massive transition where there's been a leadership change at the very top, and I'm the first one to speak publicly in that setting too. So for some reason I get to do all these firsts, but I'm happy to do it, and I'm happy to be here with you all this morning. So I want to talk a little bit about change, because it seems appropriate. And I think that we've all had experiences with change. Thanks, Theo. Thanks for that vote of confidence. We have all had a certain level of experience with change in our lives, how we manage it, how we maybe struggle through it, how we thrive through it. And I just want to share some thoughts on that, and maybe give some space for us to talk together as a community, as friends, as siblings, to bounce some ideas off of each other. So the first thing to do, I guess, would be to acknowledge the situation that our community has gone through a bit of a change, has gone through some transition. That's the space that we're in. And change can be disorienting, it can be decentering, it can be sort of dislocating, it can be disruptive. It typically is all of those things when we come up to a big change in our lives. And not just in our personal lives, but if we do these changes at work, if we do these changes in our community of faith, all of that, like sometimes it comes and it hits us, and it's a whoa kind of moment. But I want to say, like, I think that we've done the best that we can to make our community, to make our church a safe space, that we can be real here, that we can be honest about how we're feeling. We can talk about ways that we're thriving in these moments. We can talk about ways that we're struggling in these moments, and that we're here to support each other and really gel together as a community. Like we're you may have heard this over the last year, but we're in it together. But we are in it together, right? Like we are traveling through this transition together. And frankly, I think, if I'm going to be completely honest, I think that talking about change right now, pretty helpful in the sense that it's not just about kind of what we're doing here at church, and kind of what we're transitioning through here in our community. But maybe if you're like me, maybe you can sense kind of that general air of change on the horizon. Like there's this tension that we're in of the to borrow some language like from kingdom language, like in the now and not yet of the end of the pandemic. Like we're transitioning kind of back to normal life, whatever that means. Things are starting to open up. Mel and I were talking earlier in the week about like, post-COVID stress. And was that the term you were using, babe? Like, yeah, post-COVID stress.
Yeah, it's post-COVID stress because now we have to adjust to after COVID when we've just adjusted to within COVID and COVID life. And now psychotherapists are saying they're seeing more people coming to them for support for how to manage post-COVID life. Yes,
So,
you're right.
So we've kind of been talking a bit about that too. And the realization, like, holy crap, I have to remember how to be in front of people. Not that I was ever too worried about that before in my life, but like, man, how do I hang out? How do we be with people? How do, all of that. So there's just a lot of change coming. And even, in the midst of this change, there are opinions and there are divergent viewpoints. Yeah, to hug or not to hug, as Maddie just put in the chat, right? Like, I'm pro hug, I'm just saying. But there's this sense of a lot is happening. And so I want to just give a few kind of lessons, tips, things that I've picked up along the way that I hope can be helpful to you. I think that, we'll give some space here, like maybe we could share and encourage one another. What's one or two things that we've experienced that works for us, that we've done or applied to our lives when we go through periods of change and transition. So is that cool if I just kind of walk us through some of that stuff, and then we can maybe have a conversation? And yeah, why don't I pray, and then we'll start in. God of love, thank you for your provision and your faithfulness to all of us. We're thankful that your heart is set toward each and every one of us, that you know us by name, that your love and your care for us is unending, and that your faithfulness is demonstrated to us with each breath that we take, with each new day that we experience. Pray, God, that as we hang here this morning and talk about change, that you would be in our midst, that we would sense your presence, as we all sit in our various spaces, that we would be able to testify to your goodness, to your presence in our lives, to your steady hand. Thankful for this community, thankful for each one who has hopped on the call. For those who couldn't be with us, we just ask your blessing. Be with us today. In Jesus' name, amen. So 20-ish years ago, I was like fresh out of university. I had a religious studies degree, and I thought that I was pretty hot stuff, I was an associate pastor at a church down in Port Colborne. I was killing it, I was like the preacher guy. I was the youth guy. I was the guitar guy, like one of those people who just like, wow, Chris, you're good at a lot of things. Like, yeah, thanks. Totally. And with all of the false humility that comes with that season of life, I was rocking it. And we went through a transition, a leadership transition at the church I was working at. And I was asked if I would sort of preach for the next 3 or 4 Sundays to give a buffer in this time, right? So I was like 23 years old, full of like vim and vinegar, ready to like, just like, we're gonna pound through this change. We're gonna talk about God's faithfulness. We're gonna talk about mission. I'm gonna preach a killer sermon, get everybody fired up. It's gonna be sick. I preached like probably the worst sermon of my life. And the sad part is I didn't even know it. I didn't even know it until after that it was the worst sermon, because and I'll be completely like straight up with you. So I was in a United Church, and the style would be like the minister person be up at the front of the church for the whole service, and at the end we would sing the doxology, praise God from whom all blood, right? And you would walk down the middle of the church, in a very knowing and pious way, and then you would stand at the back of the church to receive and handshake people as they left the church, as they left the service, right? So pretty like kind of standard practice. And that was the time where whoever gave the word or preached the sermon that Sunday would be at the back of the church, and people would walk by, lovely sermon, thank you, lovely sermon, thank you, you know. And that would be kind of the feedback you would get. There was a woman in our church, and I had preached a sermon essentially that just said, you know, like, you know, Jesus didn't care about change, he only cared about the mission. And, you know, so keep your eyes on God, keep your eyes on the mission, stay steadfast, you know. Like, it wasn't helpful at all. Like, it was a lot of platitudes and a lot of, like, you know, Christian bumper stickers. It wasn't really that deep, right? And so as I'm shaking hands and people are smiling at me, there's this woman, Virginia North, who I've spoken of Virginia before, who didn't really have a problem speaking her mind, but she was always a very encouraging person to me in her own way. And she and her husband kind of walked by, and she goes, "That was very interesting." Shakes my hand, walks by, and as they're walking away, her husband says to her, "What did you say to him?" She said, "Well, I said it was interesting." It's like, "Well, that's good, because it wasn't good." He was like, "That was the weirdest sermon I've ever heard." And I'm standing there like, oh, okay. So I didn't nail it then. And I realized that after that, that when we talk about change, when we talk about change in a community, that it's not enough to just sort of offer up the platitudes. It's not enough just to sort of offer up the usual tropes that we get. We have to do a little more and make a little bit of space for folks to be in that space, you know. So that's what this morning is. In every aspect of our lives, we know that change happens, and it's almost this constant. It's always there, and we do subconsciously have methods and coping mechanisms that will help us navigate change, and that will help us, you know, locate ourselves in that change. In the workplace, we do this all the time. I don't know where, you know, where all of you work, but in some of the spots, you know, some of the places, some of the aspects of the work that I do, when we try to implement or do a new thing, we do like what's called like a SWOT analysis. Has anyone done one of those SWOT analyses? You know, like, so you look for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, or threats to the new opportunity, or to the new change, or to the new program that you're implementing. So yeah, SWOT, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So I don't want to do like the full-on SWOT thing, but I do want to do in this moment something similar to that, and apply a few principles of change, a few ideas around change that have been helpful to me in my own personal life. I had a period in my life a few years ago, 10, 12-ish years ago, where there was some massive change going on. Like, on every front of my life, something was changing. Many of you know that, you know, I was previously married, and my first marriage had ended. At the same time, my job in the church that I was working at had ended. I had major friend group changes. I moved. I was trying to transition out of like an academic program that I was in into something else. Like, and all of this happened at the same time. And in the middle of that, I realized that I needed a little help managing all that was going on. I needed a little guidance. I didn't have like the tools in my tool belt to do that. And so I worked with a great counselor, a guy who was super honest with me, a guy who I trusted, and who offered some of these tools, skills for going through change. And while it wasn't specifically like Christian counseling, what I loved about what he offered is that the ideas that he offered to me were easy to line up with a spiritual practice in my faith. They were easy for me to access in that way, and really kind of integrate into my relationship with Jesus. And you can find versions of what I'm about to share and what we're about to walk through together, kind of all over It's pretty standard stuff, but I just want to put them out there as kind of conversation starters for us in the space that we're in. So, the first thing to do, this is what Charlie would say to me, that when we talk about change, would be to evaluate or do a check on your level of control in a situation. So identify and name, like, what are the things that I can control? What are the things that I can't control? And oftentimes, what Charlie would say to me, and what it took me a long time to learn to realize, was evaluating your level of control takes a certain level of honesty. It takes a certain level of being real with yourself and being real with the situation and being okay with not being able to control certain things. And for some of us, some of our personalities will really allow for that. I like to be a hands-off kind of guy. I like to be like, okay, well, I can't control that. That's fine. It's easy for me to get into that space. The evaluating of our level of control. And this one is kind of a trick, actually, because in many cases, like, we have the conclusion that we come to is that we're actually not in control of a situation. We are in control of how we can respond. And we are in control of how we can learn to respond. But in the midst of a lot of change, we're not really that deeply in control of a situation. And that's okay. That's really okay. That one so much doesn't line up with a spiritual practice. That's just a truth and a good exercise to do. So what am I in control of? What am I not in control of? The next one is to practice self-care. I have a thing on my desk at work, a little card, like a little piece of paper with like a little cartoon of Jesus taking a nap, and it just says, "Be like Jesus, take naps." When we come up to change, when we come up to transition, to times of transition, I think it's important to give ourselves the space that we need, to give ourselves the opportunity to breathe and rest and reset and practice self-care. Transitions often involve they involve loss, they involve a big move, even positive transitions like a new job or a new experience, or even like the opening up of our province after some of the longest lockdowns in the world. All of that comes with a sense of anxiety and with a sense of nervousness, and the self-care piece is super important. I think of, like, one of my favorite moments in the gospel, looking like at Matthew's gospel. When we look at Matthew chapter 8, Jesus does this whole massive outpouring of work and ministry. And if you read it, like, it's like a constant cycle of output. It's it starts with Jesus healing a person with leprosy, and then there's that story around the centurion whose servant was ill, and then there's Jesus doing hanging out at Peter's house and healing a bunch of people, and then finally he withdraws. He says, okay, it's time to go across the lake. And there's this great story of Jesus down in the bottom of the boat having a nap, and then this massive storm hits, and the disciples are freaking out. Like, they're absolutely freaking out, like, Lord, like, you're taking a nap and there's this storm, like, what the guys, do you not see what I was just doing? I needed to take a nap. And so oftentimes I think, like, in matters of faith and matters of ministry, the urgency and the importance and the heaviness, and by heaviness I mean like the weight, the significance of the work that we're doing, or the stuff that we're trying to do, can often cloud our awareness or a sense that, hey, we need to do some self-care here. So practice self-care through a time of transition. Be like Jesus, take a nap. You know, if you want to be like Jesus, take naps. That's a good start. It's good onboarding. The other thing to do is to check the thought patterns, and this is where some of these ideas connect with a spiritual practice. They connect with, you know, things that we can incorporate in our own practicing of our faith. But checking the thought patterns of kind of how am I processing? How am I processing what's going on? In times of change, it's very easy for our mind to like see things in absolutes, because we get put into this fight or flight when something new comes up or when a change comes up. So we lose our ability to see the nuance. So it's like it's this or it's this, you know, like Grace left the church. Well, the church is gonna close and we're all, you know, like no, or it's gonna be perfect, fine, we're good, you know, like, but there's nuance, right? There's shades of gray in between the absolutes. And when we're in that fight or flight state, when we're in that state of trying to process stuff, and we're anxious and we're stressed and we're tired, our mind starts to really just simply compartmentalize things. It's just a psychological process of coping. But if we can capture some of those thoughts, if we can capture the thought process and kind of do again that analysis of like, okay, quietly breathe, meditate, be still for a moment. Can I analyze my thought patterns? Can I analyze my thought process? Can I say, okay, that it might not be as absolute or stark as I'm seeing it. There might be some space for nuance here. There might be some space for, you know, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be like this, that, or the other, you know. So analyze those thought patterns, check those thought patterns. And a great way to do this, I mean, like meditation, Lectio Divina, you know, devotional reading of scripture, whatever kind of spiritual practice that you use to sort of calm and center yourself, you know, that's something that can be applied in that situation. And it's something that can be used, not just in times of change, but just in times of, you know, like any time of transition, any time of like something new, any time of something, you know, where, you know, you feel that things are kind of like out of your grasp or spinning out of control. I come to that sort of checking of the thought pattern and trying to really, yeah, apply that to the moment. Next, and like these are in no order, and like I said, you will find versions of this kind of stuff all over. It's pretty basic, but I feel like it's just real stuff. The next would be to like just be in the present. Try not to push ahead to worry beyond the very moment, and that's way easier said than done. And there's that scripture again in Matthew's gospel, Matthew chapter 6, where, you know, Jesus says, you know, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will have enough worry for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So just don't worry, you know. And people have taken that, and, you know, when there's anxiety or stress in a particular situation, people will throw, you know, Matthew 6:34 says, you know, well, that's not helpful. Like, don't tell me just to not worry when I'm worried. Like be with me, but be in the present. How can we be in the present? Again, it comes to, I found for me, one of the things that kind of locks me into the right now is the application of gratitude to any situation, is the application of gratitude to whatever's going on in my life. This is something that I've done. I came to faith in Jesus, like for real, in 1994. I think it was like 16, whatever. And this was something that was sort of instilled in me, the whole attitude of gratitude thing. I know we roll our eyes a little bit, but there is the practice, the actual spiritual practice of giving thanks is a grounding, centering thing. It's tangible. You know, you can feel it. And so, yeah, in the midst of these times of transition, to be in the present, try and maybe begin to apply this gratitude thing as a means to do that, as a means to remain fixed in this moment, and not run ahead, like what's going to happen next week or next month or next year. This is not an anti-planning or an anti, being prepared kind of thing, but it's like for an in the moment kind of time as we're transitioning, as we're going through these periods of change. Be present, apply gratitude. And then the last one for me would be, what are a question to ask yourself, and this was something that was always put to me in those times of transition. It was a question that was asked of me by my counselor at the time, Charlie. It was a question that was asked of me by friends who were, and colleagues who were in ministry together. But what are your priorities, right? Like, what are the things that you are most committed to doing right now? What are the things that kind of define you in the moment? And again, a spiritual practice, and this is something that I will, as I say this, I will give full disclosure that I don't do it as often as I should, or as often as I feel like I want to. It's just something that I don't make space for, but it's something that people do, and it's journaling. Keeping like a steady track of what is it that I care about? What is it that are my non-negotiables? What is it that I'm committed to? And in our situation as a church, in our situation as community and friends who are trying to follow Jesus in the most kind of faithful way that we can, and live that out together. I think we're still in the process of identifying, missionally, what it is that we at Reunion fully are committing to, or at least what that is going to look like. We have a clear calling. We have a clear calling to be good neighbors. And Jay and Wayne have done a lot of work in our community to give us a sense of how we can neighbor really well with Indigenous siblings. And we're leaning into that. We've been through the transition over the last year of having like the anti-racism discussions. So there are things, markers of our community that are priorities, and it's good in times of transition to kind of center around those again, and rally around those and begin to identify, okay, well, what are our priorities? And both on the individual and on the corporate level, to say, okay, well, maybe it's time for me to start writing some of this stuff down, to put it on paper again, to make it tangible. I have these yellow legal pads that are all over my little room here, like literally they're everywhere. And that's part of what I do, is that, I wouldn't say it's journaling. It's more like stream of consciousness, just thoughts, and nobody can make sense of it, but I can kind of, but it solidifies it. It puts it makes it tangible. So yeah, I think evaluate our control, make sure that we're doing the self-care thing, stay with our thoughts, like keep an eye on how our thoughts are going, be in the present, and define our priorities. And these are things that we can do on an individual and a corporate level to kind of help us transition through change. Interesting thing, right? So prepping for this, digging out old notes, digging out old, found like a folder like on a USB stick that had old sermons and old stuff about like change. And I found an article that had essentially these 5 principles, but like laid out exactly how they were shared with me. And it was last updated. It's an article called "The Psychology of Dealing with Change: How to Become Resilient." And it's funny because it's like this stuff is not brand new, and it's the same stuff that is being shared over and over and over again. And I think that as a community, as individuals, we have an opportunity to kind of lean into these moments, and apply some of this stuff to our lives, and know that like there is a God who is faithful. There is a God who loves us. There is a God who is intimately invested in this community, who is intimately invested in each one of our lives. And there's a gift of grace. There's a gift of community to help us kind of navigate this stuff together. So that's kind of the end of my time. I think what I want to do, we were talking about maybe breaking out into some groups, but I don't think we have that ability right now because Zoom was being kind of funny. So I would love for us, all of us have been through change at some level. It would be great if we could come together here in this space and kind of share something that has seen you through a period of change, something that you can offer to the group, that we can share with one another, not just sort of my 5 generic this is how to do change, but beyond that, what's something that you've experienced or that you've practiced in times of change that has seen you through? Go ahead.
I can share. My name's Tanya.
Hey, Sonia, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, of course, everyone has their own story in the pandemic, but a lot like what you were speaking to earlier, Chris, like my life changed very much in this past year. It's like almost I'm a different person than I was at the beginning of last year. But something like my therapist has really helped me to do is like tap into like creativity and journaling and kind of almost rediscovering yourself, because sometimes when life is moving so quickly we forget to engage in play and creativity of ourselves, and it can sometimes really be helpful spiritually as well. So something for me that I've been doing is sometimes just journaling or drawing, or I've gotten back into acting as well, like just theater. But sometimes you end up meeting people that you never thought. But for me, sometimes it just brings a lot of peace when there can be a lot of anxiety with change. And everyone sometimes is like, change is so exciting, and then for me, I'm like, no, change is panic filled. So sometimes just like engaging activities that can bring you joy and kind of bring that childlikeness out of it, it can really connect you spiritually to different levels. So in case that's helpful for people.
Yeah, I love that. And I also just want to say, yes, awesome. Thank you, Sonia. I think that resonates with a lot of people. I also want to say too, though, like, and I kind of forgot to say this. We do have to allow space too for like lament in that space too. And I think that's part of the process of maybe like doing some of those steps. Like lament is a big part of change. And so just wanted to add that, I'm not saying like this is, if there are tough feelings or tough experiences that come up with change, those are not to be avoided or shunned or pushed away or devalued. There's just honor that. Anyway, thank you. Thanks, Sonia. Yeah, Mel.
Chris, you did a great job, by the way.
Hey, thanks.
I think one of the things that is really important in my life through much change is the importance of friendship and people that have your back. When I went through and I've mentioned this, when I went through my very public divorce on national television, one of the things that kept me, I would say, even within ministry and the work that I still do, is that people who were close to me publicly said to others, we've got your back. We will not shoot our wounded when they are out and down. And I would say that, the reason that I'm here is that I had a very strong church community and work community that helped carry me, which is in two things. Number one, for myself, I had to be good at reaching out and asking for help from others. I know that in a lot of people, when they're going through change that they believe is shameful or embarrassing, they won't reach out. And I think that's one step that I'm glad I did, is I reached out, asked for help to help me transition. I needed people to carry me through that. The second thing I think, especially for reunion in this context, is a community that will carry, that will help, that will not judge, but will offer support. And, I see Tim Day on this call, and part of the healing through that difficult change was Tim and leadership of the church I was at, that really had my back, that continued to say, we're with you, we'll give you the support. What can we do? We're here for you. And that makes all the difference. And I really believe that I'm still not only with God, but doing work in ministry because I really was carried by community. So I would just say that's really important, that if you don't have a community, if you don't have those kinds of people, that would be something to really, I would say, prioritize on the list of where are those people. God, help me find them, be in spaces for that, because you can't do life alone.
Love that. Love you. What's it like being married, though, to such a handsome man? I mean, that's the thing, what everybody wants to know. I think that's one of the questions that's on everybody's mind. But you don't have to answer that now. You can answer. Mel and I are married, by the way. That's just Heidi.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, first thanks for sharing, Chris. That was a great message. Or I don't, maybe you're not done. I don't know. This could just keep going. I've been through a lot of different like transitions. Like I've lived abroad and done different things, and sometimes for extended periods of time, and then like left and come home and said lots of goodbyes. And I think one of the important things that I found is like, I mean, there's one thing that's like, knowing that you're doing something that's God's purpose. Like if you feel called to something and like you're going into something like alone with like a lot of new people, you have to like cling to that and like know that that's what God intended, and like hold on to that with you and God as you like make this transition into new things. But then also like when you're coming back home, or like if you're having something that's like a loss that's taken away from you, yeah, I mean, you just have to feel all the feelings and go through your stages of grief and your loss and your mourning. And obviously all of us were like connected with grace to whatever levels we were. And it's a difficult transition. So allowing yourself the space and the time you need to grieve and to like go through all of the things that you need to feel, and then having some consistency of like what your routines and schedules look like. And I think especially through the pandemic, like people keep on being like, well, everything, the pandemic's over, blah, blah, blah. I'm like is it like not quite, but like I'm glad that you think so. Like, but I guess for me, I just see it as like I still need to carry like my routines, and then like things will change for other people, and then like I'll slowly transition into something new. So yeah, we can continue with our reunion routines and like our things and mourn and grieve together, and then also like step into new things at the pace that we need to. And sometimes like, you go through transitions and like you hit the ground running, and like sometimes you don't, like, so allowing space and time for whatever that transition looks like. Because at this point, like we've been through so many transitions, like between like work and life and church, and everything is just coming from all sides. So like, yeah, sometimes these transitions are slower. So like sometimes I'm on the plane making my transition and I'm like ready by the time I get home. Or like there's sometimes intermediate space. Like when I did a year abroad in Egypt. And I was just thinking a lot with just in the last few weeks about that. Just that there's like, you leave home and then you spend like 2 weeks in Pennsylvania, like getting ready. It's like you kind of grieve your goodbyes and like your like regular life for like however long you're going to do MCC SALT missions. And then, and then you're like ready to go. And then you like show up in Egypt, and then you're like, cool, all right, now I'm ready to be here. Like I had this in between space. Or like you finish that experience, you say your goodbyes of all the people that you've known for like a year and connected with like a lot. And then you're like sad about that, you grieve for like a week or whatever, and then you re-enter your home. Like you don't, it's important to have like in between space.
Yeah.
And just, yeah, whatever amount of time is needed for transitions, like it looks different every time. And you have to have like a lot of processing time for yourself, I think, through everything as well. Whatever it looks like for everybody.
Yeah.
It's really important for in between space, I think. So
Love that. Love that. Thank you.
I think something that I have found really helpful, especially this month, has been lots of change for me with work and with Grace. And so something that I find really helpful is I really like to journal. So I often it's just word vomit of all of my feelings there. Like it's not very cohesive, but it's there. But I like to go back and kind of like take a look back and think about like, okay, what were times that there was change or there was something hard? And I'm like, oh, okay, like, well, I survived that. Right. And to be reminded of the ways that God was faithful then it reminds me that, okay, well, like he can show up and be faithful here. And I think for me, that gives me like a little bit of a perspective. So then I don't lose my head in like, well, this is different and everything's different. What am I going to do? Right. Then it's that reminder, okay, well, I've survived change before and people have been supportive and like, I've got faith that Christ can move in this and that God is still at work, even in that change. But I need that perspective shift, right? I need that reminder of like, okay, I can go back and be reminded of that because then it gives me hope that, okay, we can navigate this because we've done this before, right? And we're learning every time we change. And it doesn't mean that there's not hard feelings there. I'm like, okay, I might make it through, but like, how long is this going to take? But it's still that reminder that it can happen and change can be navigated. And yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't want to cut anyone off. Does anyone else want to share anything before we kind of wrap?
I'll share one really quick one. Heidi kind of mentioned it earlier too when she mentioned that normalcy, like finding something with normalcy in the midst of a transition. Like over the past 2 months, like I moved to Toronto, new jobs, new opportunities, and it's not like a good or a bad transition. It's like this is just like the next step in life. And so moving to a new city, just finding the normalcy in like a routine when there's so many other things that, like I'll be juggling like at the beginning of the move and of that transition. Finding one thing that's just like consistent for me that I can kind of like rest in while everything else just like takes a bit more energy than maybe it would after it kind of like settles in. And so as like a personal example, like I found a park nearby. And so I would just like go for a walk in this park as like a way of just kind of like grounding myself every like couple days or so, when it can feel just so exhausting with things that don't maybe not are normally exhausting, but because of the transitions, because of the different tolls that it takes on you physically or emotionally, it's just to have that type of normalcy in that consistency within a time of transition. I've been found helpful.
It's awesome.
I love hearing what everybody's saying. It's great. I think that I resonate a lot with the take that time, take that space, give yourself permission to grieve, to be aware of the losses, be aware of what's going on, and accept it. I mean, we don't have control of everything. So just being aware of what you have control over and what you don't have control over, what's within our scope of being able to do something about and not do something about it, and just accepting that, and giving ourselves permission to just sit with that for a while and be okay with that. That's okay, right? I know one of the things for me going through periods of change is one of the things you had said, Chris, was the whole piece of your thought life and the thought processes, and just being able to take a step back and be aware of what my thought processes are. So it's like pausing and going, okay, what is going on here? Am I obsessing about these thoughts? Are these repetitive thoughts going on in my mind? Are they sticky thoughts? We call them sometimes, right? And if that's going on, take a step back and say, okay, what am I grateful for in this moment? How can I change those thoughts to not be sticky thoughts, to not be obsessive? And how can I have that growth mindset to move forward in this situation? So just being aware of those things and being mindful of those things has been helpful for me too.
Yeah, that I like that. Yeah, I'm the same. Like just that awareness. I don't know. I just like it. I just really like it. I don't know. I'm an Enneagram 4. I like emotional things. I like getting into like talks about feelings and stuff because I feel everything big. I feel everything big, you know. And I my story that I tell myself is that I'm the only one who's feeling it this big. Nobody feels it as big as I do. I'm feeling this the biggest, you know what I mean? And so I get that. Sometimes I need to like, hey, dude, be real. Like they only messed up your order at McDonald's. Get off your high horse and just chill, bud. You don't have to have like a full meltdown about this. So yeah, I'm a big feeler and I think it's good to track that stuff. Anybody else? I don't want to cut anybody off. This has been great. But I want to just give one last opportunity for someone to share. Erna Birder. Well, that's great. So just to wrap our time, I think what we've demonstrated here is that we have everything we need to do this. We have everything we need to be Reunion Oakville in this season. All of us have come to this place of sort of being where we are, and we made it, you know. So I want to do something. It's kind of different, but I'd ask if you would all close your eyes, and I'm just going to pray and bless us and send us on our way for the day. Just take a deep breath in, a nice deep breath in, and just feel it. Let it out. Deep breaths in and out, and feel it. Like feel those breaths filling every space in your lungs. Feel those breaths going down to the tips of your toes. And with every breath that you take in, hear God's word to you that you are enough, that you are beloved, that you are precious, that you have everything you need. Hear God's delight in you. Hear God's celebration of you being here at this moment right now. You made it. You are here, and you are enough, and you are beloved. God, as we continue to journey together as a community of faith built around Jesus, built around love and compassion for neighbor, as we continue to live into our calling as a community to bear witness to your faithfulness, to your love, to your grace, to your mercy for all people. We are so thankful for your provision. We are so thankful for the way that you have sustained us and carried us and brought us, yeah, indeed, even to this moment, this very moment. We remember, God, that as we, draw breath, as we go about our day, as we take in the beauty of the world around us, that as we confront the challenges of the day, that you are with us, that you sustain us, that you tell us that we are beloved, that we are cherished, that we are enough. And that as hard as we maybe sometimes feel like we try to pursue you, that you are with us, that you pursue us, that you chase us with your love, because you delight in us and you want to be with us. Help us to make space in our hearts and in our minds for friends and neighbors who aren't at the table yet. Help us to live into the calling of what it means to be a faithful follower of you, Jesus. And we thank you for this time together this morning, this reminder that you've given us everything we need. That you are with us and that you are true and steadfast. We love you this morning, God, and we're thankful, really thankful for the gift of this time together. So be with us as we go our separate ways. Pray blessing on each one here. In Jesus' name.